talk a little more baseball here in this segment. We welcome in from Grantland.com and author of an upcoming Montreal Expos book. You can follow him on Twitter.com/Jonah Keri, and you can also hear him on the morning show on occasion. It's Jonah Keri. Hey, Jonah, how you doing?
You can catch him at the poker table losing all his money.
Yeah. Yeah, that was an interesting night. Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a chance to play some poker with Jonah.
I'm much more aggressive in poker than I am in my real life. I don't know how that is.
You're usually it seemed like you were a pretty laid back guy until you got onto that table.
I guess so. Well, I was still laid back. I was just, throwing my money away is the bottom line.
All right. Well, I didn't win that night either, so. Well,
so how you doing?
I'm all right. We're just talking some baseball, talking a little Bobby Valentine. We'll get your opinion on that situation in a moment. 44-year anniversary of the Expos joining the National League this day in 1968. Now, I believe they were already granted the franchise. They just apparently made it official that they joined the National League today, 44 years ago today. I don't know. Was there ever a chance they were going to join the American League?
Well, they were just trying to figure out what to do with the expansion teams, and it was all in flux at the time. I mean, going back, and I interviewed Charles Bronfman for the Expos books. He told me all kinds of stuff. But one of the things that went down is, he had this money collected, and then guys started backing out, and it looked like they might give the team to Buffalo instead. That almost happened. So
wow.
There was all kinds of stuff. Machinations just trying to figure out who's going to which league and what's happening, and are they going to go what's going to happen with San Diego or Buffalo or whatever? And finally they ended up in the National League and got a properly financed team, and it all worked out, at least for the first couple of decades there.
What about Buffalo? Did they even have a stadium?
Well, I mean, they would have, was Jerry Park a real stadium, right? I mean, they had, Buffalo had something. They had something that could have been temporary. So that was kind of the idea. And don't forget, back then, I mean, it was still a little bit more loosey-goosey. You could get away with staying in a smaller stadium for a little while. Now, if you want an expansion franchise or whatever, you can't go play in a 15,000-seat stadium temporarily. That wouldn't really work. You need something, whatever, like a football stadium or something. When the Nationals moved to B.C., they played in RFK Stadium, which was not a good facility, but it was big enough and so forth. Back then, you could kind of make do for a few years with a smaller minor league type of stadium if you really need to.
All right. Well, obviously, there's been a kind of a fun resurgence of at least just baseball talk in the city in the last few years. Started with the Andre Dawson induction in 2010 and the fun video by our buddy Anakin Slade, and then a whole bunch of other things. Obviously, the culminating, I'm sure, with the passing of Gary Carter, and then the 81 Expos reunion. You had a chance you were in town for part of that reunion, correct?
I was. I sat with Jay Farrar of your station and Dave Kaufman, and it was a great night. I got to watch Anakin perform, and all the old Expos were there, and it was wonderful. On my way out, I was actually walking out with Bryn Smith. He was on his way to get a smoke, and we just had this nice, informal 10, 15-minute conversation. Aside from the fact that I'm supposed to be interviewing all these guys for the book, it was just cool to, talk to them with their guard down, and not necessarily as a journalist, and just talk about what the weekend was all about. And I think the thing that really hit home for me was Warren Cromartie reaching out to Ellis Valentine. They were roommates and, friends, and then they sort of became rivals, and there was a falling out, and Valentine got traded, and they hadn't seen each other for 30 years, and it was a big love fest between those two. There were a lot of things that went down, Billy and Rodney Scott being good friends and them being reunited, a lot of things. But I thought the Cromartie-Valentine thing was one of my favorites.
Yeah, it was an interesting sort of sighting. Everyone was kind of surprised to see Ellis Valentine, a guy that nobody really, it's kind of almost like a legend to people of the younger generation who were fans.
Yep.
I'll be 35 in March, and I really didn't, see this guy play, and just heard stuff about the arm and then about some substance problems, and then getting shipped out, and then just to see how large this guy was, obviously gaining a few pounds, but just a tall guy, and strolling into the park with a toothpick in his mouth, kind of just a cool guy, and the fans and the kids loving him during the clinics. It was kind of a fun sight to see, and you thought to yourself, boy, if this guy would have kept it together, I wonder how big he would have been in the city.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about that. I'm 37, so I really just barely remember. I mean, the first year that I can remember watching baseball is 81, and that was the year that he got traded. So, yeah, no, to your point, there's no question about it. He got hit in the face in 1980 with a pitch, and all the other stuff that happened off the field, you can make a case that hit by a pitch might have been as big, if not a bigger factor in his kind of quick demise from baseball. That really seemed to shake him up. And all the things that I've read and all the people that I've interviewed have suggested that that's the case too. But I mean, the guy is a peach. I mean, he does all kinds of charity stuff now, and he's really involved in his local community. He lives in Dallas, and he's a very interesting man. I got to talk to him a little bit at the event and kind of on the phone, but I haven't done the full interview yet. But it's great. He's really come a long way, I think, as a person, I guess you could say, and certainly back in the day, he was immensely talented. I mean, anybody who was there in that era could certainly tell you that.
You mentioned this. You're putting together a book, and why now? Why did you want to do the book? And it's obviously a very, very long process, isn't it?
Yeah, it wasn't even my idea. It was the person who brought it to me was my editor. He was the guy who worked with me on my previous book called The Extra 2% about the Tampa Bay Rays. He was working at Random House, and I'll try to tell that story as quickly as possible. The reason that he reached out to me is because we used to post on the same Expos message board in the late 90s. It was something called baseballboards.com, which became Fan Home and kind of disappeared after that. I think Scout.com absorbed them eventually. But I was not a professional baseball writer or anything like that. I was a writer, but I wrote about other stuff. But I was a fan, and I was a bit of a stats nerd, and I would post all this stuff. And this guy who was also on the board, I guess, took notice of my posts, and literally 8 or 9 years later sent me an email and said, I remember you when you used to post under a pseudonym online, and I really liked your stuff, and I followed your career. Now I'm an editor at Random House. Why don't you come write a book for me? Which I thought someone was pranking me. I thought that was impossible, that posting on an Expos message board could get me a book contract. But that's exactly what happened. What happened. Yeah, I know. I love the Internet. And so then, we did that, and the book did well. It was a New York Times bestseller, blah, blah, blah. And then he ended up moving from Random House to Random House Canada. They're based in Toronto, and we kept in touch. And he's a big Expos fan. The whole reason that he went on that board and so forth, he's an American, but he went to McGill in the late 90s, so he remembers Vlad and that era very well. And he came to me with the Expos idea. He said, listen, I mean, we both love the Expos, and this would be a great project, and I think it would be a great legacy to talk about the team and so forth. And if you put it out in 2014, it'll be the 10-year anniversary of them leaving and the 20-year anniversary of the strike in 1994. And at first I said, well, no way. I don't want to do a book about the Expos. And he said, why not? And I said, because it's a lot of work. I mean, the Rays book took 2 years of my life, and I had kids in the interim, my twins, and it was just very busy and very hectic and very difficult and a lot of back pain and whatever. And anyway, long story short, too late, he kind of arm wrestled me into it. It's not that I didn't. This is the best project I could ever imagine. I love the Expos with all my heart. I'm born and raised in Montreal, and didn't leave until after Concordia and so forth. But I just felt that it was going to be this monumental project, and I know how I work. For me to do this properly, I would have to go talk to everybody. I would have to go track down Macer's Turrets and talk to him about the 10 minutes that he played for the Expos, and sit down with Claude Brochu and find Charles Bronfman and Tim Wallach and everybody. I would just have to do it really hardcore, and I just said, all right, let's do it. And so that's what I've been doing for the last year. I've been working on this thing. I still have about a year to go, really, before I submit my manuscript, and the book, like I said, isn't coming out until spring of 2014. So I think that it'll be, a really complete work. It's going to have really fun baseball stories, but also stories about what actually happened to the team, the politics of it, the business of it, really getting behind the scenes. And, I hope to do the subject justice. To me, it's like a lifetime opportunity to do this thing. And I know how much people care. There are people that care about the Expos in Montreal. I want all of them to read it and say, all right, this guy represented properly. He did a good job.
All right, well, here's the deal. We're almost out of time in this segment. I'd love to bring you back for a few more minutes to talk about the current MLB in the next segment. That doable?
Yeah, no problem.
All right, well, before we go here in this segment, two guys I want you to talk about for your book, if you can, or talk to, I should say. The guy who was crying on the field in 2004 would love to read about a quote or two from Brad Wilkerson, if that was possible. And
I got to work on that. Brad's dad actually used to post on that same Expos message board, and he used to message me privately and send me tickets. So, like when the Expos would come to LA, he would just give me tickets on behalf of Brad, and I'd go to games. So I'll get it. If I can't get a hold of Brad directly, I'll just contact his dad and make it work that way.
Beautiful.
Yes, I want to talk to Brad.
And then and then the other guy who was a fan favorite hugely here in his short time with the Expos, kind of fallen off the map, not even anywhere. I've been trying to track him down. David Segui would be great.